morning, Rosewood. It is right at 10 a.m. Welcome to our October 2025 Leadership Live. As you can see on our intro screen right here, our speaker today is Laura Graham, Faculty Instructor of Management at Campbell University, and we will hear more about her from her in a moment. As you all know, we like to start with our why, which is to multiply the blessings and opportunities that have been placed into our trust. And as we move forward into the final quarter of the year, we will see we are entering our theme of cultivating a future-focused culture, with our first session being leading with emotional intelligence. And with it being quarter four, we only have a few sessions left in 2025. So for anybody that is missing a session this year that needs to catch up, reach out to marketing and we can get you that YouTube link so you can get all of the sessions for the year and get that pin at the end of the year. But as I mentioned before, today's topic is emotional intelligence, and it will be led by Laura Graham. And without further ado, Laura, I'll let you kind of further introduce yourself. The floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Jay. I'm really excited to be here today and to talk about this important topic. A little bit about me before we get started is I am brand new to Campbell. I'm a new faculty instructor there where I'm teaching marketing and management. And previous to that, I was with North Carolina Central University for 12 years, where I taught business communications and professional development. And I am really passionate about this topic of emotional intelligence, not just because it's a good way for us to treat ourselves and our colleagues with respect and to work well together, but also because it has really important impact and real world benefits for our businesses, for our goals. We get better outcomes as a business when we lead with emotional intelligence. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. And before we get started, I want to tell you a story. Now, I would start this story with once upon a time, but actually this is a real story that happened in 2021. So back in 2021, the CEO at Better.com, which was an online mortgage company, made the decision that they needed to lay off a good number of people at their business. They needed to lay off 900 people. And how they did that was they called the people who were going to be laid off onto a Zoom call. And in a 3-minute call, they told them that they were no longer going to be employed. And the CEO spent most of those 3 minutes talking about how hard having to make this call was on him and how he was going to be strong and how he wasn't going to show emotion. And he went through the whole 3 minutes basically doing that, very robotic, very stiff. And then the call ended and 900 people were without jobs. Now, this 3-minute internal call then got leaked to the public, and it caused a firestorm of bad publicity. Not because of the decision to lay off people. It wasn't the business strategy that was the problem. It was how it was done. The focus from the CEO on how hard this was on him showed a startling lack of empathy. In addition, after the call, it took hours for the company to get any information to the people about their benefits or how their separation was going to be affected. And oh, did I mention that this was in right before the holidays? So all of this caused such a problem and such a PR firestorm, as I said, not because of the business strategy, but because of the lack of leadership and emotional intelligence. So today we're going to talk about why we focus on EQ. We're going to talk about the skills that are related to emotional intelligence and how we can grow those skills. And I'm going to give you some real practical strategies that will help you not only grow your own skills, but help you in coaching people that work with you. So let's start with why we study EQ. We already talked about Better.com and how they sort of failed in this, but there are individual implications for this as well. According to Harvard Business School, emotional intelligence, which is how we abbreviate that with EQ, but emotional intelligence is the stronger predictor of performance on the job because people who have good emotional intelligence stay calm under pressure, they resolve conflict effectively, They tend to respond to coworkers with empathy, which helps team building. And from their manager's perspective, they're viewed as better performers. So for those reasons, in addition to how it affects our business overall, we really want to take some focus on this. And I know that Rosewood has already talked about this in different leadership training opportunities, but it's good to review it and to get some more practical consideration. So that's sort of why we study EQ. Now let's talk about the source of emotional intelligence. Where do our emotions come from? Well, as I said, I'm a faculty instructor of marketing and management. So I'm not a neuroscience scientist, and I am not a brain surgeon. So this is going to be very, very basic. But essentially, there are three parts of our brains that get involved here. The first one is the reptilian brain. This is where we have a stimulus come to us, and our fight, flight, or hide responses get triggered. Then after it goes through that part of our brain, we get to the limbic brain, which is our emotional or feeling brain, as that's where we start to learn how we feel about what's happening to us. So it's no longer that immediate reaction, but we're starting to feel about this. And then after that, we get to the neocortex, which is our rational or thinking brain. So in order for us to get to the point where we can make rational decisions about how we want to behave based on how we're being stimulated, it has to get through three different sections of our brain. So that's why it can be so hard to control our emotions, because we can't just react in the moment in our first reaction, because that only gets us so far. And when we get through to start talking about the strategies and how to build our skills, you'll see that a lot of these strategies and skills are really about giving us time to get from that first reaction to where we can get to the neocortex. Because if we're just focusing and letting our reactions come from that limbic brain, we can fall into emotional hijacking, where the urge to act before thinking is just almost irresistible. If you've ever had somebody say something to you like, well, I just have a bad temper. That's how I am. My family's Irish. We're known for our bad tempers, right? Or, if somebody's kind of come at me some type of way, I'm just going to come back at them twice as hard. Or we talk about, we're just going to match energies. We're just going to match energies. And so if you come at me this way, I'm going to come at you that way. But if that's where we're sitting and if that's where we're reacting from, what we end up doing is we react in the moment, and we tend to escalate problems rather than solve them. So now that we understand the source of our emotions and what it takes to kind of get to that control, let's now talk about the 4 different skills of emotional intelligence. And if you're interested in more information about this, a couple of books I'd recommend to you are Emotional Intelligence 2.0 by Bradbury and Graves, and Daniel Goleman's Emotional Intelligence, Why This is More Important Than IQ. So the 4 skills of emotional intelligence are divided into 2 different sections. The sections on self-awareness and self-management are about how we are with ourselves and how we manage ourselves. And on the other side, social awareness and relationship management, these are about how we deal with other people. So self-awareness is our personal competence. Do we know ourselves? Are we aware of ourselves? And then once we're aware, can we manage and make decisions and control our emotions? Then on the other side, dealing with other people, we have social awareness, which involves empathy and perspective taking. And we're going to really focus on empathy in our talk today. And then relationship management. How do we resolve conflicts? How do we behave so that we can maintain and grow our relationships in the way that we want them to? So we're going to go through each of these step by step, and I'm going to give you strategies for each one. So let's first talk about self-awareness. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to come off mute for just a minute. Somebody tell me, how is Minnie Mouse not displaying self-awareness?
Is it because she's a mouse herself?
Right. She's a mouse herself, so why would she be afraid of a mouse? Okay, so self-awareness. So let's talk about some strategies related to that. We have to know who we are first. So let's talk about some self-awareness strategies. Well, first of all, we have to admit that there is a ripple effect from our own emotions. How we feel affects other people. There's the old example of, someone who goes to their job and they're yelled at by their boss, and they come home and they yell at their spouse, and the spouse yells at the kids, and then the kids yell at the dog, and then the dog yells at the cat, et cetera, et cetera. We don't have, as leaders, we don't have the luxury of just saying, well, everybody knows who I am and I'm allowed to have a bad day. Absolutely, you're allowed to have a bad day. We all have them. But we also have to realize that there's a cost when we give in to that and we don't control our emotions. One of the best ways to develop self-awareness is to really think about who and what pushes our buttons, what triggers us. Is there a particular type of event or particular type of person that we find ourselves reacting to over and over again in the same way? Figuring out what those situations and people are, and then why we're reacting in those ways, can really help us in controlling our reactions later. And a lot of times, we're reacting not to the person or the event that's right in front of us, but we're reacting to how that person or event makes us remember other past similar reactions or similar people. And so we can have an outsized reaction to something that really wasn't that big of a deal in front of us, but it's compounded by everything else that came along. Third, we want to make sure that we get to know ourselves under stress. A very wise person I knew once said that, or said a lot of times actually, that people are like toothpaste tubes, and you don't really know what's in them until they get squeezed. So I know what I'm like whenever everything's going great, everybody's fine, business is fine, but what happens when things start going wrong? Or what happens when deadlines get short and we're down a person and we don't know how we're going to get everything done? Do we still behave in the same ways? And then visit our values. If I really am sure about what I value and what I want and the kind of person I want to be, then I'm going to be more likely to be aware of how I'm responding in the moment and why things are affecting me in a certain way. One of the things that I thought was interesting when I was looking at Rosewood's information is your company values. The spirit of excellence, we before me, doing the right thing, innovate to elevate, grace through generosity. Obviously, you know these much better than I do. But when I looked at how they were described, so many of these are involved with emotional intelligence. For example, the spirit of excellence includes treating people with respect. In order to treat people with respect, we need to have empathy and we need to engage in relationship management. We before me, collaboration and cooperation, again, working together, relationship management, doing the right thing, upholding our commitments. This requires our own self-awareness and self-management. And grace through generosity. Again, being empathetic and being willing to be a servant leader requires a lot of self-management, because we have to sometimes work against our own self-interest and not do what we would want because it's better for someone else. So a really good strategy for self-management is visiting your values, whether it's your company values or your own personal values. What do you really care about? It's possible that some of our reactions are based on the fact that we think people are violating our values, or we're being asked to go against something that we think is important. And if we're not aware of what those issues are, then it can be a surprise to us when our emotions get involved in a particular situation. Let's look at a scenario. So self-awareness in action. So in this case, there's a marketing manager, and they notice that they become defensive and tense whenever they're in a meeting and their ideas are challenged. So they spend some time reflecting on why this might be and realize that it stems from earlier experiences where they were harshly criticized by a bad manager. Recognizing what these emotional triggers are, they now pause, breathe, and then respond more constructively to feedback, realizing that they don't have to keep fighting those same battles that they were fighting as a younger employee. So now they can say things like, well, that's a really interesting perspective. Can you tell me more about your concerns? As opposed to putting up a firewall, getting defensive, and then being labeled as unteachable or untrainable. The business benefits of this are not only is this just a nicer way for them to behave, but it means that they're not going to be put on a professional improvement plan. They're going to get better results for their reviews, and management doesn't have to send them to management courses and conflict management courses. And also, they're just going to be able to be a better employee, and they're going to get better feedback all along, because now they can take the constructive criticism, fix what's going on, and then be more effective later. So self-awareness is the first key. Next, we'll talk about self-management. So it's one thing to be aware of what your triggers are and your values, but it's another thing then to be able to manage how you are going to behave once you are triggered. Knowing your triggers is one thing. Being able to behave in a way that you want to, that lives out your values, that's another thing. So self-management. And when I was thinking about this e-card really seemed to say a lot. Sometimes the amount of self-control it takes to not say what's on my mind is so immense, I need a nap afterward. All right, so let's talk about some self-management strategies. I mentioned when I was talking about where the source of emotional intelligence comes from, I mentioned that a lot of the strategies are about giving yourself time to be able to get from that reptile brain to the neocortex. And these first two strategies, count to 10 and sleep on it, are definitely part of that. Count to 10 is one of those things that maybe your dad told you, maybe your mom told you. If you were getting upset, count to 10 before you respond. It's a great strategy because it gives us time to get from that reptile brain, that limbic brain, and then into that neocortex. Sleep on it. We don't always have to give a response right away. Now, this is controversial because nowadays communication is so instantaneous. We call it direct messages. We call it instant messaging. But just because we can send an instant response doesn't necessarily mean that we should. Sometimes what somebody sends to us, maybe they don't mean anything by it, but their tone in their email or their tone in their Slack message or their instant message comes across to us in a way that is very aggressive. If we respond back in that way to what our perception of their tone is, we might escalate the problem more so than have a good response. So when you get something, whether it's a written message or a verbal message or whatever is happening, think, count, breathe before you respond. In some things, you may need an even longer time than 10 seconds or a count to 10. You might need time to think about it. You might need time to talk with a trusted mentor about how you should respond before you respond. So you might have to actually sleep on it or give yourself time. Now, I know that a lot of times if you, let me ask the group, if you text somebody something, how long do they have to respond before you start to wonder or you start getting concerned?
I think it depends on the conversation.
Okay. In a business setting.
Oh. I'd say maybe a few hours or so.
Okay. Yeah, because we know that someone might be in a meeting or something like that. So if you know that you're going to need to take some time to respond, or you're going to need to talk to somebody else before you respond, a good idea is to let somebody know that you did receive their message and give them a time frame for when they'll get a response from you. That way they're not left hanging, wondering if you even got the message. So if somebody sends you an email, for example, and you need to take some time to think about it, or you want to talk to somebody else first about it, it's okay to send back an email that says, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate your concerns, or I appreciate what you're saying or your insights. That's a great question. Whatever it is, to acknowledge that you read what they sent. Let me think about that for a minute, and I'll get back to you by the end of day, or I'll get back to you tomorrow by 10 a.m. And that way you're not leaving them hanging, and it doesn't seem like you're not responding, but you still have a chance to make it through the steps you need to feel like you have a good response. And that's an excellent course of self-management. That's a good strategy. Another part of self-management, though, is how we talk to ourselves about ourselves. Our internal critics, some of you have an internal critic that is your cheerleader, and they're always saying, you're doing a great job. And sometimes our internal critic is not like that. Our internal critic is talking us down, it's accusing us, it's telling us things that may or may not even be true. And it can affect how we behave to other people and with our relationships. So a good self-management strategy is to take control of our self-talk. Constructive feedback from your internal critic is, ooh, I think that maybe you were a little bit quick to respond in that moment. And I think maybe you might have sounded a little bit more emotional than you wanted to. Next time, why don't we do something else? That's constructive. What's not constructive is an internal critic that just accuses you and tears you down. Oh, you lost your cool again. You're a failure. You'll never be able to do this. You're never going to get any further because you can't control yourself. That's not helpful self-talk. My rule of thumb is I don't let myself talk to myself in a way that I would not let someone talk to my friend or my family member. If I wouldn't let someone talk to my friend like that, then I shouldn't let myself talk to myself like that. So I put it through the friend test, and that's a good strategy. And we can't really manage ourselves and control our emotions effectively if we're completely depleted mentally or emotionally. So it's oftentimes really helpful to put a mental recharge into our schedule. And that doesn't mean we need to take a half a day off and go to the spa for a massage. Now, that sounds great. And if we could do that, great. But that's not all. It doesn't necessarily need to be that kind of a strategy. So come off mute again and tell me, what are some things that you do that help you recharge? Just in general, what are some things that help you recharge or kind of get your perspective back or that help you feel better?
A walk in nature. Or just walk in my neighborhood. There's a lot of trees in my neighborhood, so I like to go on walks. I go on a walk right after I get off work with my dog, and it could be a mile or two. But when I come home, I am ready to, talk to my wife, hang out, do anything I do. But same with people. Like before work, I wake up early in the morning, go for a walk and run. So it just helps me recharge and just gets my social battery recharged, I guess.
Great. Yeah. And it helps you have that space between, okay, I've left work and now this is my space in between. And now I start my other part of my life.
Yeah.
What are some other strategies?
I'd either golf or reading for me.
Okay.
Definitely chills me out and calms me down and puts me in my Zen mode.
It's great. Golf or reading. I'm good at one of those two. It's not golf. What are some other things that people do to recharge?
Mine is not as active. I'll watch Netflix.
Okay. Watching something on Netflix. What's something short that you can do? Let's say you don't have an hour. What's something you can do in 15 minutes or 5 minutes?
Candy Crush. No, I'm kidding.
What's Indie
Meditate.
Crush? Okay, meditate. Is Indie Crush a game?
Oh
It is,
yeah, Candy Crush.
Oh, okay, Candy Crush. All right, yeah, I have played that. Okay, right. So even though it's a joke, sort of this game, but there are these casual games on your phone that you can play that only give you 5 lives, and once the 5 lives are done, you're done. So it enforces sort of a limit on you, right? But all the things that we talked about, taking a quick walk, watching something on Netflix, whether it's funny or dramatic or scary, whatever is your thing, whatever is your genre, reading, listening to music, talking to a friend. All of these things can be a mental recharge that we can do throughout the day that don't take us away very much from our job. So for example, I'm an extrovert. So if I am needing to recharge, what I'm going to do is talk to one of my friends for 5 or 10 minutes. And then I'm topped back up. And knowing myself as an extrovert, self-awareness, then I can think what kinds of things help me when I need a recharge. Let's talk about introverts and extroverts for a minute. Do you have the ability to raise hands, to put the raise hands emoji on? Okay, so if you're an extrovert or an ambivert, can you please put the raise hand emoji on? Okay. And you'll notice that I asked the extroverts to disclose as opposed to the introverts. So another part about self-management, though, is understanding that sometimes we need to respond in ways that help other people rather than just how we would like to respond. For example, as an extrovert, if I lead a meeting, my preference is to get everybody together on the team, put out the problem and tell about the parameters, and then just popcorn, brainstorm, come up with solutions. I love that. Great energy. However, if I have introverts on my team, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send out an agenda for the meeting early, a couple days before at least, and I'm going to give them the brief of what the problem is, what we're trying to solve, and the parameters, to give them some time to think about it before they come into a meeting so that they can present their best ideas. Because in my experience, and of course this is generalization, but in my experience, introverts like to take some time to think before they're asked to give a solution or give an idea. So that's part of self-management as well. And as a leader, I need to look at the whole makeup of my team and decide, okay, who is on my team? How do they like to work? And what can I do to help them? This is also part of relationship management, but the self-management part comes from me deciding that it doesn't matter what my best way of working is or the way I prefer to work. I'm going to look at what's good for the team, and I'm going to make the decision to do what's in the best interest of the team. So let's look at a strategy or a scenario. So in this scenario of self-management in action, we've got an IT project manager who gets an urgent email at 5:45, end of day, about a major system crash, and it's affecting their key clients. So this is something that cannot be put off until later. So instead of panicking or lashing out at the team, they acknowledge that they are stressed, self-awareness, but then they channel it productively, self-management. They prioritize immediate actions, they delegate their tasks clearly, and they maintain a composed demeanor while coordinating the emergency response. And this helps the team keep focused and effective. Again, real world business benefits to displaying emotional intelligence, because which is going to be a more effective and more productive way, running around like your hair's on fire and making people more stressed, or handling it, and then if you need to fall apart afterward in private, feel free, but the business is getting done because we are managing ourselves. All right, so this is the side of emotional intelligence that deals with ourselves and what we can control about ourselves. Now let's talk about the strategies and the skills that deal with other people, and we're going to start with empathy and social awareness. Okay, so this is definitely seeing the world from a different point of view. But there is a discussion about what the difference between empathy and sympathy. And we know that there is a difference. Sort of empathy is feeling with and sympathy is feeling for. But I want to take just a minute for us to watch a short video that I think really helps clarify and crystallize what is the difference between empathy and sympathy. And even though this video puts this not from necessarily a business perspective, I think while we're watching this, you can think about how this can be useful in a business context. So that's going to be on the next slide. And we can just start the video.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Okay. So in our leadership, when we're dealing and coaching our teams, or when we're working with people, even peer-to-peer, we might find out information about them. They might disclose things to us, or we can just tell that something is going on with them. And yes, in a business environment, there are limits to how much perhaps we might disclose. There are limits to what the kinds of things we can do, or the kinds of, we don't want to invade somebody's privacy, for example. But empathy still helps us in dealing with clients and our colleagues. So how do we show empathy? What are some strategies that we can use to show empathy? Well, first of all, we need to watch our body language very carefully. So we need to watch our own body language. For example, if somebody is disclosing something to us, if you're in HR, if you're a team lead or a manager, someone might need to disclose something to you because it affects their work. And our body language can tell them more, of course, than our words. So we might be saying, oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you for telling me. I don't even know what to say right now. And that sounds like a very empathetic response. But if our body language is, oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, well, thank you for telling me. And we are closing ourselves off as much as possible, and we are even physically backing up. What our body language tells them is that what you're telling me is so disturbing that I can't hear it, I don't want to be a part of it, and I don't want it to get on me. And that may not be what we mean, But empathy realizes that our nonverbals, if they are in conflict with what we are saying verbally, people believe our nonverbals. It's absolutely borne out by research over and over again. We don't just need to watch our own body language, though. We need to watch other people's body language so that we can hear saying. An example of this is that Gen Z stare that has been talked about in the media a lot. That sort of stone face, you know, and it can be very frustrating if you're from a different generation that is used to someone giving you feedback that, yes, they hear you. Yes, they understand. They're going to try to use what you're telling them. But we need to think about not just, okay, what do these Gen Zers need to stop doing this stare? What do they need to know about good body language? We need to be able to interpret it. Because if we're leading teams that include people of that generation, there is something that they are communicating through their own body language. So it's up to us to be able to kind of get that subtext as well. Sometimes that can communicate, I don't understand. I feel like I'm being attacked. I'm not sure, right? So we need to watch our own body language and we need to watch others. We also need to practice the art of listening. So listening is not just the sound hitting our eardrums. Listening is really listening to understand, not to respond. So again, paying attention. It means that we can't be multitasking. We can't be reading our email and on the phone and responding to texts and feel like we're really listening to people. If you've ever been on the phone with somebody and you hear in the background the sound of their keys, of their keyboard going, you know that you don't feel heard. So we need to really practice the art of listening. And then being able to take perspective and step into their shoes. Try to think of things from their point of view, even in the situation of, even if what they're doing is frustrating you and they're in the wrong, try to step into their shoes and see why they might be behaving in that way. Because how you come at them, how you try to correct that behavior, if correction is necessary, if you can at least understand why they would think that or why they would behave that way, it can help you come at it from a different angle. And then we also need to be able to catch the mood of the room. And that just means being able to look at how people are interacting with each other. When you walk into a meeting, if there are undercurrents, being able to figure out what those undercurrents are and not step into the middle of it as well and make things worse, and not escalate, but actually really understand. Let's see, there's something in the chat. Yeah, the Gen Z stare, that's right. Okay. So empathy requires us being aware of our own selves, but it also requires us being aware of other people, responding to them in ways and understanding their own body language and their own subtext as much as we understand and try to manage our own. So let's look at an empathy scenario. So in this case, a new team leader notices that one of their top performers, someone who's always done very well, has become quiet and is now missing deadlines. Instead of just jumping on the behavior that needs to be changed and immediately criticizing them, they schedule a private check-in. And they learn that the employee is caring for an ill parent. And if you've ever been the caregiver for a child or a parent or another family member, you know how taxing that can be and all-encompassing. So understanding this perspective, they work together to create a flexible schedule and redistribute some of the workload temporarily, strengthening team loyalty and maintaining productivity, two really important business goals. You'll notice that we redistribute the workload temporarily, which strengthens team loyalty, because if I'm one of the people who gets some of this extra workload and I understand why this is coming to me, yes, in the moment, it's frustrating that I've got more work to do. But if I see how my manager is supporting that teammate, then I know that that manager is going to support me as well. And so that's how this helps improve team loyalty, even if it requires some extra work on some other team member's part at the beginning. So empathy in action isn't just a touchy-feely thing that's nice to have, but let's get back to the real work. It is the real work. It's part of making sure that we are being as productive as possible, that we're keeping our employees. Because again, if you're in HR, you know that keeping an employee and helping them through whatever their situation is that they're going through is a lot cheaper, frankly, and easier than getting rid of that employee or having them quit and then having to go find someone else and train them. That's just business. Okay, so the final skill, let's talk about that. And that's relationship management. So we know ourselves, self-awareness. We're able to manage our emotions in the moment, self-management. We're showing empathy, and we're figuring out how we can display empathy for the people that we work with. And now we want to talk about how we use all of that to maintain and grow relationships and manage them in the way that we want to. So let's look at some strategies for that. First of all, one of the best ways to grow and maintain relationships is to be open and curious. Understanding other people's cultures, understanding other people's points of view, whether it's what their background is in business, how they got to the place where they are. Do you know how everybody in your team ended up where they are? Have you ever sat around and talked about your business journey? You might get some really interesting insights that can help you grow closer as a team and work more effectively together. We have to learn how to take feedback well, because that is a key relationship management strategy. And sometimes that is both good feedback, compliments, and constructive feedback or criticisms. Some people just can't take a compliment. You did a great job on that report. Oh, thanks. I could have done better. I felt like maybe this section was weak. Do you really think, go ahead and come off mute and tell me, when someone gives you a compliment, what is the correct response? What's a good response?
I would say gratitude for their awareness of what you've done.
Yep. Gratitude. Nicole in the chat said, thank you. That's a great response. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for noticing. Now, if it's a team effort and you feel like you're getting more credit and you want to spread that credit around, there's nothing wrong with saying, thank you so much. The whole team worked really hard on that. That's great emotional intelligence as well, not taking all the credit for yourself. But so taking positive feedback, compliments well, that's important. It's also important to take constructive or critical feedback well, even when the person who's delivering it to you does not display good emotional intelligence in how they deliver it to you. Again, we're not matching energies here. We're not only taking feedback well if it's delivered in a way that we like or that is a good way to deliver feedback. We're going to try to separate the message from the messenger. Maybe we don't work well with that person. Maybe we've butted heads before, but if they have a good point, if they have something constructive that can help us be better, we need to take that well, because that will help us manage that relationship and grow that relationship. And who knows, how we respond may give them a better cue of how they need to behave as well. The third one says only get mad on purpose. And you might be thinking, well, it's not really appropriate in a business setting to get mad at all. But there are some times, if you visit your values, if you look at the Rosewood values, there may be times when we need to stand our ground. And maybe we don't get mad, maybe we don't display anger, but we need to stand our ground and let someone know that this is not appropriate, that there's a behavior that needs to stop. But if we're doing that with everything, if we get a reputation for always being on a hair trigger, then people aren't going to want to come to us. They're going to be afraid of having to walk on eggshells. So we're going to get marginalized in our teams. We're going to get marginalized in the business. We're not going to be put in front of clients anymore. So if we want to manage the relationship with our clients, with our team members, with our managers, We need to make sure that if we are standing our ground on principle, then it needs to be something that is absolutely important and imperative that we stand on. And your own values and those Rosewood values are a great way to sort of evaluate, is this something that rises to that level? And when we have those tough conversations, we need to be willing to tackle those tough conversations, but in a way that's constructive. So again, we're not going to match energies and yell at people. We're not going to call people names. We're not going to say you're a slacker, you don't do your work, etc. What we can do is we can call out behavior in a way that is professional and has a better way of perhaps working. And one of the ways to do this is through I statements. I statements are when we focus not on you did this, you're a slacker, you did the wrong thing, you never pull your weight, you always let us down. Instead, we focus on the behavior and how that behavior makes us feel and how we want things to go in the future. So an I statement structure might be, when you behavior, I feel how you feel about it. In the future, I would like, and that's a good place to start a conversation, because maybe you'll hear something back from them that says, well, the reason I did that is because, and then you can have an actual conversation. Where if we're just sort of slinging insults back and forth, even if they're polite, business, nice insults, then that has then people are going to be defensive. So an I statement might look like this. When you come back late from lunch, it makes me feel like you don't respect the time of the people who have to cover for you. In the future, I'd like you to come back on time for lunch. And if something happens where you can't, I need you to call and let us know immediately. Okay? Again, that spells out things pretty specifically, but it also gives an opportunity for the person to come back and say, okay, you're right, I'm sorry, didn't realize how it's impacting the team. I'll fix that. Or I know it's happened twice this week. Let me tell you what happened. And gives you an opportunity to provide an empathetic response if it's something that's a genuine concern. So let's talk about a relationship management scenario. So in this case, a sales director needs to merge two competing sales teams after a company acquisition. And recognizing that there's a potential for conflict and unhealthy competition, they create opportunities for both teams to collaborate, organize team building activities, establish a mentoring system, and they pair members from each original team together. Then they actively celebrate joint successes and address conflicts transparently, which helps gradually build a unified team culture. And no, it's not going to happen overnight, but it can happen. And instead of having destructive competition and people hoarding leads and not working together, you have everybody working together for healthy competition and better sales outcomes. Okay, so those are the 4 skills. Let's just kind of do a recap. So some key takeaways from today are, first of all, high emotional intelligence makes better employees and more productive teams. So emotional intelligence isn't just a touchy-feely thing that it's nice to have. This is real work that helps have better business outcomes. Emotional intelligence should be a direct reflection of our values, both personally and the companies and organizations we choose to work for. Rosewood has a really strong history of values. And I saw several examples of how you live out your values through coaching, through working together, through programs that help other people with generosity and being servant leaders. And then finally, emotional intelligence is a set of skills anyone can learn. And just like skills like dancing or public speaking or singing, some people come in better at that than others, but it's a set of skills that anyone can learn and grow. And if you use the strategies that we went through today, anyone can grow their emotional intelligence. So as a leader, you can grow your own emotional intelligence. You can help coach your team to increase their skills. And I hope that you'll show patience to those team members who perhaps aren't as far along on the journey as you are, knowing that it's a set of skills anyone can learn help your team members who aren't displaying emotional intelligence or as much to learn to be better. So I thank you very much for this time, and hopefully with emotional intelligence, we can all learn to be better business leaders in our jobs and in our lives and in our relationships. So does anybody have any questions or comments? Okay. Well, if not, I will. Oh, yeah.
Oh, you can go ahead, Ms. Graham.
I was just going to say, if there aren't any questions, then again, I'll recommend to you 2 books if you're interested in more information. Emotional Intelligence 2.0 and by Bradbury and Greaves, and Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. Thank you very much for your time.
If no one has any questions, I'd like to thank Ms. Laura Graham for her time today. Excellent session. And again, if there's anybody on chat that is missing a Leadership Live session and they do not know, reach out to marketing. We will get that out to you so you can get your pin. And then coming in November, our next session is Get It, Want It, Capacity to Do It. So thank you again, Ms. Laura Graham, for your time today. And thank you, Rosewood.
It was my pleasure. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.